It's a monthly online webinar which we host First Things First Okanagan, and we present different perspectives on climate solutions for our communities. Those of us who are here in the Okanagan, we live on the traditional and unceded territory of the Seal people. We're very grateful to live on this beautiful land with healthy streams and lakes. We're fortunate to benefit from the fisheries work that's sponsored by a SEAL organization, the Okanagan Nation Alliance. The ONA states that it's their responsibility to be stewards of the land and the waters, and to bring back healthy populations of native fish species. The ONA operate a hatchery here in Penticton, and you can go on a 1-hour tour. Once or twice a year, they involve local schools and hatcheries and provincial prisons, actually, in the provincial prison in Oliver and school kids here in Penticton. They get them involved with raising the fry from eggs to releasable fish. And this just happened last week. A whole bunch of school kids got together at Shingle Creek in Penticton. Here you can see this photo from Summerland Review. They release the fry. There's drumming and singing to honor the fish that are returning to the waters. So tonight we'll be hearing about water levels in our lakes. And it's just a reminder that water is so precious to us, but it's also extremely important for wildlife and for fish. So I'm going to pass things over to Sue Kirschman to introduce tonight's guest speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret, and hi, everybody. Here in the Okanagan, we have large lakes and seem to have an abundant supply of fresh water. But with climate change and a growing population, there are stresses on our valley's water system. The video, a river film, which you hopefully found the time to watch this week, it illustrates how there are different competing needs that must be balanced. Farmers need water for irrigation, fish require sufficient flow to spawn, wineries and other industries need water for processing, and of course, we all use water in our homes and businesses and to drink. Managing our water system is one of the Okanagan Basin Water Board's main activities. Our guest speaker tonight, Corinne Jackson, is responsible for getting the word out about Okanagan water issues and the activities of the Okanagan Basin Water Board. Corinne is the staff lead on the Okanagan WaterWise communication strategy, which includes 2 campaigns, Make Water Work and Don't Move a Muscle. She's uniquely suited for this role, having a Bachelor of Arts degree in political science and work experience as an award-winning journalist with a special interest in social justice issues. Before Corinne starts, we're going to do a short poll just to help with the presentation. Lori's just going to put up a couple of questions there. So if you could just take a minute to go through those, about 30 seconds or so it should take.
Go down to the bottom. There's another question on the same poll. Go right down to the bottom. Number 1 is, where do you live? And number 2 is, how long have you lived in the valley?
So do you think, Lori, that's enough time?
People are still
okay, you can see.
Coming in. Yes, I can see them coming up.
Okay.
And I think that's everyone. So I'll end the poll, and then I'll hopefully I'll be able to share it with everyone. Can you see it?
Yes, perfect. 35% Penticton, 13% Summerland, 22% Kelowna, 4% Oliver, and 26% other. So that's where you live. And the other one, how long have you lived in the valley? 10% under 5 years, 10% 5 to 10 years, and 81% over 10 years. So a lot of longer term folks.
And so we have 2 more questions that we want to know if you could put into the chat. I'm putting them in there. Where did you move from and what brought you here? It's interesting to see where people are from.
While people are just finishing up with that, just a reminder that we'll be having a moderated Q&A after Corinne's presentation. So as she's speaking, if you have any questions, just type them into the chat. I think we can go ahead now, Corinne.
Sure.
Thanks so much.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's nice to know who I'm talking with. So should I just share screen now then?
Sure. Yep, looks good.
All right. So yes, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. And I realize that I am up against the finals here, and so what a tough choice perhaps for some, the hockey game versus attending tonight. So I do appreciate everyone coming out this evening. As mentioned, I'm the communications director for the Okanagan Basin Water Board and in charge of the public outreach program, Okanagan Waterwise. And as noted, the two campaigns, Make Water Work, which is a water conservation campaign, and that's delivered in partnership with local governments and utilities throughout the Okanagan. And then I'm also responsible for our Don't Move a Mussel campaign that hopefully some of you have heard about. So that's bringing awareness regarding invasive mussels. The reason I wanted to see where people came here from, how long they've been here, and what brought them here, because I wanted to know, well, I know what brought me here. I know that I moved to the Okanagan in 1998. It was for a job, but I was very targeted in my job search. I knew I wanted to come to the Okanagan, drawn in by the warm summers, the snowy winters, because I like skiing too, and of course the beautiful lakes and the beaches. So in large part, it was the water and the climate that brought me here. And I saw that that was, that for some of you, it was the same. But I also noticed, fruit was noted, and wine, all of which of course requires water. So I'm hoping that as I advance, this will work. Did that work?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, so I've been here now 26 years. And in that time, I've seen some pretty wild weather, as probably a lot of you have. We saw the historic flooding in 2017. And this photo actually is from 2017 when we had historic flooding. And then we had fires. So you can see the, kids are getting out on the water in a canoe or something, but there's trees in the water. That was the flooding. And you can see in the distance that there are fires that are already burning. So my daughter, interestingly, who's turning 20, explained to me this week that she was having a conversation with someone. They were talking about the weather and about summer being almost here, but concern around fire and concern around water. And she pointed out to me something I'd never realized, but she'll be 20. And she said, I've only ever known summer to have fires, which was really quite poignant and quite sad for me to hear that. But it's true. Like, if we think to recent years, we've had a lot of fires, we've had drought, and we've had flooding. So tonight, I'm going to talk about what we're seeing in the Okanagan with the water of the valley, what we're seeing with rising temperatures, and how this is affecting how much water we have, how much water we use, the importance of conservation, and what you can do to help save water in what is, in fact, Canada's most water-stressed region. I know some of you know about the Okanagan Basin Water Board, but I thought it might be good to just give a quick overview. So we're a local government agency, quite unique to BC and even Canada. And we were formed in 1970 as a collaboration between 3 regional governments in the Okanagan, the North Okanagan Regional District, Central Okanagan, and Okanagan-Similkameen Regional Districts. And our board is made up of directors from each of the 3 regional districts. So we have 3 from the Central Okanagan here, 3 from the Okanagan-Similkameen, and 3 from the North Okanagan. Our chair currently is Blair Ireland, who is the mayor of Lake Country, and Doug Holmes is our vice chair now, and he is the mayor of Summerland. And our board in 2006 was expanded to include 3 additional directors. We have now, it's Tim Lazard, who's with Penticton Indian Band, so he's representing Okanagan Nation Alliance on the board. We also have Bob Rasco, who is a Water Supply Association of BC. He also operates Black Mountain Irrigation District here, but he represents water supply suppliers in BC, or utilities. And then we've got Jeremy Fike, whose day job is working with Environment and Climate Change Canada, but he's also chair of our Water Stewardship Council. And the Water Stewardship Council is made up of a number of organizations that provide technical advice to the board. So the board is made up of elected officials who don't necessarily have a background in water. So the technical advisory body, the Water Stewardship Council, meets monthly, and it's made up of folks from the BC Fruit Growers Association, from various agricultural groups, but also from the universities and colleges that are involved in water programs. We've got federal government, provincial government, and local governments that are involved in water issues. So it's a broad group that provides technical advice to our board. And because some of you may have watched a river film, I thought it might be important to mention a couple of things about the International Joint Commission, and in particular, the International Osoyoos Lake Board of Control. The Okanagan, or Okanagan, as it's known across the border, is a transboundary watershed. And so the IOLBC, or International Osoyoos Lake Board of Control, is responsible for ensuring that the regulations for outflows from Osoyoos Lake are carried out. And this helps prevent conflict and ensures the interests of all, so people and fish on both sides of the border, making sure that that is maintained. And we're very fortunate to have both our executive director, Anna Warwick-Sears, as well as our board director, Sue McCordoff, who's also a mayor of Osoyoos, on that board as Canadian representatives. So the Okanagan Basin Water Board was initially formed in response to water quality issues back in 1970. Primarily invasive milfoil, which some of you are probably aware of, and failing sewage systems, which were polluting our waters. So at the time, and in the background, there were also concerns about future water quantity as our population grew. But it took a bit of a backseat, and really it was more the water quality issues that had the attention of the Water Board. So the agency was initiated to provide leadership on valley-wide water issues, recognizing that our water is all connected, and what happens in one area affects another. So all the way from, so the water board, its watershed extends from Armstrong, and the Splatson First Nation is included in part of that. So from Armstrong, and it flows right through to Osoyoos. And that is the region in which we do our work. So recognizing our growing issues with water, the Okanagan Basin Water Board launched an extensive study in 2007 called the Okanagan Water Supply and Demand Study. And it was the most advanced study of its kind in Canada and released its results in 2010. And it was the first in-depth study of our water supply since 1974. You know, we often talk about, and I think I heard it alluded to at the beginning of tonight's talk, about the myth of abundance in the Okanagan, that people look out their windows and see this chain of big, beautiful lakes throughout the valley. And often I hear people say that we couldn't possibly have water issues as they see these lakes. But the study provided new and startling information that we were on an unsustainable path. And our research found that after agriculture, our second largest use of water in the Okanagan was used by residents outdoors. An update in the research was conducted in 2015 to 2018 and found that while outdoor water use is still the second largest use, it's less than our earlier study showed. And this is in part due to definitely a better ability to collect data some years later, but also local governments and utilities are bringing in water meters and tying their water rates to actual use. And we know that that is also an effective mechanism to promote conservation. And finally, the fact that word is getting out about the need to change our watering behaviors is also having an effect. That said, we're still concerned about the amount of water we get and the amount being used. And I'll just show you why. So this graph, it shows what we're dealing with here in the Okanagan when it comes to water quantity. The water we receive can vary widely. So of course, we've seen drought. So in 2003, we had drought and fires. If anyone was here back then, you might recall the Okanagan Mountain Fire, which was quite horrific. In 2017, we had, well, I showed you the picture earlier, we had flooding, historic flooding, and then we had fires. And then last year, I'm just trying to move my mouse here. So here's 2003. You might recall, well, obviously the terrible fires last year. Well, that came on the heels of a drought. And of course, this drought is continuing into this year. So as we continue to see ever-increasing extreme weather events, the Water Board is working with the province and others on reviewing the Okanagan Lake Regulation System, which is looking to update the protocols for managing the lake's dams and ensure that the provincial dam managers have the data that they need to hold water back when it's needed and to release water when needed to make sure that there's enough water for the fish, for firefighting, for food production, and for domestic use. So as noted a moment ago, an update to our water supply and demand study in 2015-2018 found that residential outdoor use is still the second largest use of water outside after irrigation. So you can see here 12%. On average, Okanagan households use 1,032 liters of water each day. And that is spread across the Okanagan Valley. And that's that's averaged out over the year. But it's approximately 448 liters per person per day. So we used to talk about the old number was, gee whiz, now I'm using this new number so often now I can't remember. I think it was 675 liters per person per day when we first came out with our study. That has now been updated where we look at households rather than per person. But when you look at it, it's about 2.2 people per person in a household. It works out to about 448 liters per person per day. So an improvement to our previous numbers, but it is still one of the highest rates of use than anywhere in Canada. And at the same time, we've known this for a number of years now, that there is actually less water available per person in the Okanagan than anywhere else in Canada. And this provides another breakdown of when water is used and by who. So again, the figure of 1,032 liters per day is an annual average for all Okanagan households. And this study shows that the average family uses 391 liters per person per day and 64 liters outdoors. So 391 liters indoors per day, 641 liters outdoor per day. But that is, of course, mostly in summer. As you can see, our use goes up in April, starts to climb in April when we start to turn on the taps for our gardens, and it continues into October. And of course, the same goes for agriculture. You can see how agriculture use also goes up tremendously at that time. By the way, we often have people refer to the golf courses, and you can see from here that golf courses actually don't use as much as one might think. Okay, so being in the rain shadow, or in the shadow of the coast and Cascade Mountain Range, the Okanagan only receives on average about 5.9 inches or 150 millimeters in the South Okanagan, and 12 inches to 300 millimeters in the north. And at the same time, Okanagan Lake, on average, is managed to fill 1.5 meters, so about 5 feet. And it's managed at that 1.5 meters to prevent flooding downstream and to ensure that we have enough water to meet the demands in summer and fall. And so to use any more than that 1.5 meters would result in mining the lake. So similar to what has been happening in Lake Mead, if anyone has seen down in that area where they've got the bathtub ring, this is something that we're obviously trying to avoid in the Okanagan. So this year, the province's dam manager is actually holding water back because there's concern that we are not getting the rains that we need this spring, and we didn't get the snowpack that we needed to, and then the freshet to fill our lake and address the fact that we ended the year in drought. So recognizing that, knowing there wasn't going to be the snowpack to refill, knowing that we weren't getting the rainfall, the dam manager has just held the lake at 1.5 meters. And there's two other points that were also mentioned earlier in the introduction that has us concerned about water in the Okanagan. As of 2021, the most recent stats available, we had about 372,000 people living in the Okanagan. At that time, the Central Okanagan was considered the fastest growing region in Canada, and it's expected that this region alone, the Central Okanagan, will swell within the next 20 years by another 120,000 people in 22 years, so one generation. And so as our population grows, of course, so will the need for water. And of course, there's our changing climate that's been mentioned. A number of studies in the last few years have indicated that we're going to start seeing more winter precipitation falling as rain. We saw some of that this year, and rain instead of snow, and that the snowpack will melt sooner. Again, something that we did see this year. So we're very pleased to have a new person on our staff, Sandra Shira, who has a background in environmental sciences and climate change studies, and she's been doing some climate modeling for us. So the next few slides are something new that we're going to be rolling out soon, but happy to share them with you. So Sandra's been looking at temperatures and precipitation, comparing historical averages from 1951 to 1980, and then measuring that against the last 30 years. And this graphic shows how every year has been hotter than normal in the last 30 years, as you'll see here in Vernon, Coldstram Ranch area, in Kelowna, and in Penticton. And not only is it getting warmer, it's also, we're losing this variability that we were seeing, where some days, some years would be cooler. So the other thing that Sandra wanted me to mention is that in addition to losing that variability, we're also seeing that some of these are the highest temperatures on record in these areas as well. We also are seeing extreme temperatures. So we used to have an average of 25 days that were over 30 degrees Celsius. That's between 1951 and 1980. We had an average of 25 days that would hit above 30 degrees. But now we're experiencing more than 25 almost every year. And again, you can see that variability is being lost. And we see this new pattern and see a new trend of fewer days below zero. Precipitation is a bit harder to measure. It's harder to see the trends, but you can see that we are becoming drier than normal all across the valley. So in Vernon, here especially you see it in Kelowna and down in Penticton. And a couple of things to note, because temperatures are going up, we actually need more precipitation to counteract the evaporation or loss of moisture that we are experiencing. And because of the warmer temperatures, we see more precipitation in winter that is falling as rain instead of snow. So this is where we ended last year. This is as of November 30th. This shows the drought map for the province. So this was the last drought map that the province put out, again on November 30th, and we were still at level 2 drought. And this image here on the right is actually of Vaso Creek as of August 29th. And it was provided by the Okanagan Nation Alliance, indicating the last water in that stream. So that was August 29th. Of course, there was no water that came after this. And so there were abandoned fish, stranded fish. So this is just one creek of several that ONA, that the Okanagan Nation Alliance has been working to bring salmon back to. And throughout the winter, BC River Forecast Centre takes snow measurements at various locations around the province to track the province's water supply. And as you probably noticed, we didn't get a lot of snow this winter. We also haven't had much rain, and it's been warm. So this was May 1. This was the last snow survey that was provided by the province. And you can see that the Okanagan here is at 60% of normal. So we had less snowpack, 40% less snowpack, and it melted quickly. So you can imagine where we're at now. So this was May 1st. This is May 16th. But one day later, it hasn't changed much in the last couple of weeks for the Okanagan anyway. But one day later, the province put out its first drought map, putting the Okanagan at level 2 drought. So we were on a call yesterday with the province and utilities throughout the region. Normally ONA is also on the call, but they were away yesterday. But it was determined that while some areas would go up a drought level, like Fort Nelson went from level 3 to level 4, others would remain where they are. And so the Okanagan is at level 2 drought. And today we put out our first drought bulletin. And this is a full month earlier than last year. So as noted earlier, our research from 2010 was showing that the current path we were on was not sustainable. And now we've got science, more recent science, that shows that we have some troubling trends that are facing us. But in 2010, the Okanagan Basin Water Board launched its public outreach program, Okanagan Waterwise, recognizing that there were some pretty simple changes that we could make that would have a positive impact on our community. So just trying to advance. So the Okanagan Waterwise program is the public outreach face of the Okanagan Basin Water Board. And its main purpose is to inform residents of this valley of the issues that we're facing and engage them and support them in making positive changes in their own water habits. The overarching message behind our communications is clear and simple. One valley, one water. All of the water within the valley is connected, and we all must do our part to protect it for ourselves, our neighbors, and of course, our children and future generations. So we have a website at Okanagan Water or at okwaterwise.ca. And on the website, you'll find information about with tips about what you can do in your homes, in your yards, at work, when you're enjoying the outdoors. It talks about water conservation, but also water protection. So what you can do in the backcountry that will keep it clean. And the website is actually going through an overhaul right now, a redesign and expansion. So we're excited about having that launch soon. On the website, we also have a number of resources for the public, for educators and students. So I encourage you to go there and find some materials there. We also have outreach materials that were developed by partners. We give grants out to groups that work on various projects to conserve water or improve water quality. It's our Water Conservation and Quality Improvement Grant Program. And so this is a sample of some of the projects that have been done through that grant program that are also available on our website. Of course, we're on social media, as are you. So welcome you to find us there and follow along and join us. And then I just wanted to talk about the Okanagan Waterwise's, well, we've got two campaigns. As I mentioned, we've got the Make Water Work campaign. Again, that's our valley-wide water conservation campaign that began in 2011. And it's aimed at targeting the second largest use of water in the valley, outdoor residential use. The campaign has been developed and is delivered in partnership with local government utilities throughout the Okanagan, as well as garden center partners that are promoting our Make Water Work plant collection. So in Penticton, Garden Works is one of our partners. And we have partners up and down the valley. So we're trying to encourage landscaping with Okanagan appropriate plants. As well, we've got our Don't Move a Muscle campaign, and you can find it also on Okanagan Waterwise. Both campaigns have their own websites, and you'll see them advertised on billboards, radio, and more. And both campaigns run coincidentally between May and October. And the reason being that, of course, water is being used at its most from May to October, but that's also when water recreation is occurring and when there's a threat of invasive mussels. So both campaigns operate at those times of the year. So I wanted to talk about the Make Water Work campaign. Again, as I mentioned, it's the Okanagan Waterwise program developed and delivers this program in partnership with local government. So all of the folks that are on this call, all of your municipalities are partners in this. So City of Penticton, Penticton Indian Band, West Kelowna, Summerland, et cetera, City of Kelowna. And the campaign Make Water Work, again, is run when it's typically when people are turning on the taps outside. In the last few years, we've been ramping up even sooner. In fact, this past year, because we were in drought when we ended the campaign in October, we continued to promote conservation through Okanagan Waterwise and promote, instead of outdoor watering because we knew people weren't using it outdoors, but we knew what could be coming in the spring. We were encouraging indoor conservation throughout the winter and into the early spring. And now we're moving to encouraging that outdoor conservation. So the campaign includes tips to conserve water outside that are easy, but can make a real difference. And so we ask residents to pledge to make water work in the summer more effectively and efficiently. And you can probably guess what some of the tips or pledges are. So we ask people to pledge to only water between dusk and dawn, obviously to prevent evaporation. We also ask people to water plants, not pavement. It might sound silly, but we do still see people watering their sidewalks. So it's a good reminder. We also encourage people to not mow low and to let it grow, to leave grass 2 to 3 inches long, because of course, leaving grass longer slows evaporation, so saves water, but it's also a fire smart way of maintaining your lawn. And then we ask people to pledge to leave their grass clippings as mulch to, again, retain moisture on their lawn, requiring less watering. And this is, of course, if you have lawn, because I know a lot of people are moving away from lawn. I know that we've been slowly getting rid of lawn and xeriscaping more of our yard. And this one takes a little more effort, but we also ask people to aerate their lawn and top dress it with compost. This is to prevent over-fertilizing and preventing stormwater pollution, and again, improving water penetration. And finally, we ask people to change out some of their lawn for drought-tolerant turf or no native or low water variety plants. So trying again to encourage people to pair plants suitable to our dry climate. And we have a contest each year where we ask those who pledge they can enter to win WaterWise Yard prizes. This year, it's 2 prizes of $500 in WaterWise landscape material. And then we have the Make Water Work plant collection. And maybe some of you are already aware of this, but hopefully it's new information for others. So this is the part of the program that we've really turned a lot of our attention to, trying to get people to plant the right types of material. So we started the plant collection in 2014, and we developed it with the Okanagan Xeriscape Association. And it's grown and evolved every year since then. So at one point, people were very interested in native plants. So we made sure to include native plants and And then last year, we actually included the Nsilhon name, so the Okanagan First Nation word for these native plants. And then we had another year, people were interested in edible plants. So not talking pot, but other types of edible plants that are water-wise, such as rhubarb and such. So those are also included on the plant list. This year, we are updating the plant list to note the ones that are fire smart, which actually is the largest, is the majority of the plants on the list are already deemed as fire smart, but we'll be adding that notation to the list so that people know and can feel comfortable knowing that when they plant water-wise, they're also being fire smart. And so this, as I mentioned, the plant list was developed in partnership with the Okanagan Xeriscape Association, who is an invaluable partner in helping us promote the water conservation. And this is our plant list, which is going to be updated, but it has 105 plants that includes perennials, grasses, shrubs, and trees. So that's the list. Again, we'll be updating that. And this is just an image of what we're trying to avoid. So this is an image from Castanet and shows one of several cedar hedges that burned during the McDougall Creek fire last year. And this is what we're promoting. So instead, we're promoting plants that use little water, but will do well in the Okanagan's climate. These are a few photos from my garden. This is my passion project since the pandemic. So we've been transforming a weedy, unused, grassy area into a lovely water-wise garden that attracts bees, butterflies, and more. And it's an evolving process. I'm learning what will do well and what won't, and what the deer like and what they don't, and leaving some for the deer and moving others that I want to protect into other areas of the garden that they can't reach. But like many Okanagan residents, I'm also growing more and more aware of how much precipitation we get and trying to be water conscious in my plant choices. When I'm not in my garden and when I'm wearing my Okanagan Basin Water Board or my WaterWise hat, I turn my focus to planting seeds of understanding. So about the need to protect and conserve the water of this valley, the same water that we enjoy swimming in, that we drink, that provides water for the fresh fruits and vegetables that we enjoy, the wine that's required for many animals and plants that we share this valley with, and for the growing needs to ensure enough for firefighting and for fish in this fall. So thank you for having me this evening and allowing me to help cultivate a greater understanding for the need to be water-wise in the Okanagan, in Canada's most water-stressed region.
Thank you very much, Corinne. That was really interesting, and especially the charts you showed at the beginning, showing us exactly where we are with those drier years. That's really important for everybody to see. I wish actually we had it in the newspaper so everyone could see where we are. There are a number of questions, and they're kind of divided into two areas, so maybe I'll give you some time to end. There's a couple of questions about agriculture. Now, was it 70% that agriculture was the water use in the Okanagan? I'm trying to remember. It's quite a high percentage.
It is a high percentage. I believe that is correct.
Yes, 70%. And so Chris asks, why is agriculture allowed to use overhead irrigation during the day? Shouldn't they be required to use drip? And I guess the general question is, we're hearing about how you're engaging homeowners and residents. What is the Okanagan Basin Water Board doing to engage agriculture if there's such a huge part of water use?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good question. I didn't touch on that tonight because I was talking to residents is what I thought, as opposed to farmers.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for the question, because absolutely agriculture, we recognize it is a very large water user. And so we do provide materials. We have on our website, we have information for agricultural water users to try and encourage conservation, and especially during drought. And that can also use water differently so that you can increase your crop yield, but also be very conscious of how much water you're using. So we do have those materials available. And as I've mentioned, we put out a drought bulletin today. That goes out to all municipalities. It goes out to governments, to elected officials. It goes out to media who share it more widely. And in that bulletin, we have a link to where people can find information if they are an agricultural water user that can help prevent overuse of water, especially at this time when we know that we're very concerned about the potential for this drought lasting through the summer.
The other, oh, sorry,
I was just going to mention also that absolutely, we do work with agricultural water users, but I also want to make sure that it's understood too that agriculture, of course, feeds our community and our economy. And so, although we don't want it to be wasted, we do recognize the absolute benefits that water for farm crops provide versus water on lawns, for example. So there was also a second part to that question. Can you remind me?
I guess just a question of being allowed to use overhead irrigation.
Ah, okay, right. Thank you. So yeah, it depends on the crop. So grapes actually is one of the most water water-wise crops. Like it actually, you can use drip irrigation for grapes, and they use very little water. Forage, however, you can't do drip irrigation on forage crops, on hay and that sort of thing. And so that does require that overhead. Sometimes you see the rolling wheels. And also our understanding is that although sometimes you can absolutely run your irrigation, depending on the size of your farm, during the coolest time of the day, there are some areas where you just, to be able to get through your entire crop, you end up watering during the day in hot conditions. That said, we absolutely have seen, I know I've seen crops being watered during daytime, which seems absolutely unnecessary at times, for sure. And we get complaints about that. And when we do, I do tell people, by all means, contact the farmer and ask, because maybe they have a good reason, or contact your water utility and say, what the heck is going on? It's 35 degrees out and so is watering, so by all means, make those phone calls and make yourselves known that it's a concern.
There's a question about different types of agriculture, water use. You've said forage is very water intensive, grapes much not very water wise. Where does the tree fruit crops fall? And perhaps also someone was asking about animal agriculture and market vegetable gardening. That's a lot to throw at you. You're not an expert, but there is an interest, I guess, in finding out which of the agricultural options are more water intensive.
Oh, I just know, yeah, I can't tell you what, I'm not sure, but I am absolutely happy to find that out and provide that information to the organizers that can then send that information out. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
For sure.
There's another cluster of questions that came in that was really asking about getting the information out to municipalities and regional districts. I think those people that are interested see signage at the nurseries and that sort of thing. But I guess how do you get that information out to the individual households? Is there any outreach where somebody might get it with a bill or a municipal missive of some kind? Because I guess people must be asking that question because they feel like there maybe isn't adequate penetration into our communities.
Okay. Absolutely. I know that some of the utilities put this information out with their water bills that, that it's time to start conserving and, where you can find water restrictions. They're all partners with the Make Water Work campaign. So I know that you can go to the Make Water Work website and find water restrictions for your neighborhood there. But as for the utilities, we work with them to also try and get that message out. So sometimes it's through the water bills. And they should have posters up in various areas of the community. Of course, we'll have billboards out and radio ads, and we'll be using social media ads. So if you're on social media, you'll see some of those. And it's a joint effort to try and get that word out. If there are suggestions as to other ways to get the word out, I'm also happy to hear those.
Thank you for mentioning that, so people can maybe put that in the chat. There is a question about groundwater licenses. And whether there's any restriction on people, farmers, and I would add just otherwise non-farmers, any restrictions on use of those water licenses, which I guess are drawing on the water table.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to be licensed for groundwater use now. That is the law. So in terms of agricultural water, so large users of groundwater are required to have a water license now. And so with any water license, you have an allocation that you are allowed to use. And so, yes, it is monitored, and so yes, absolutely. I don't know if people were aware of last summer in Westwold and some of the pushback in that area. So, unfortunately, the province has learned from last year, but last year when we saw that groundwater levels were dropping, groundwater levels, but surface water levels, creeks were drying up and there wasn't the water for the fish. And so the province went in and spoke to people with water licenses, groundwater and surface water, and said, these were farmers, and they were being told, you need to stop watering because there isn't enough in the streams for the fish. And if there isn't water for the fish, then the entire ecosystem will collapse. And so it's a lose for everyone and everything. So there was real pushback from some farmers in Westwold who said, well, we're pulling off groundwater. We don't see how that has anything to do with surface water, but in fact, it does. And so the province was left with having to try and explain this connection between ground and surface water in the midst of a severe drought, and with extreme pushback by farmers saying, you cannot tell me not to water when I've got a license saying that I can. And I need it to be able to water my crops, and ensure that I've got, water for my animals, etc. So, absolutely, it is licensed and it is watched, but this year the province got ahead of things and actually held those kind of drought, they were called decoding drought sessions throughout the province in some of the more concerning areas of the province, and held these meetings to try and explain the connection between ground and surface water and how drawing from one can affect another. So I hope that answered that question.
It does. Actually, thank you so much for giving fairly comprehensive answers to the audience's questions. We have Deb and Craig who they've just put a link in. People can capture it if they want to, and we'll probably put it in the notes that are sent to people. It's just a general link that shows different types of agriculture and water uses in a general sense. It won't be specific to the Okanagan, but a lot of people would probably find that really interesting. And someone is mentioning that Peachland apparently is not allowing cedar hedge nurseries, too much water use. So any info or suggestions on hedge alternatives? I'm sure you probably have that in some of your information bulletins on plants.
Yeah, we do. So if you go to the Make Water Work plant collection, you'll find some alternatives, but we do have junipers and yews, and European privet, for example, which are water wise. However, you do, as I look out my window here, we have Mugo pine. When we bought the house 7 years ago, it was here. So it is huge, and it's right against the wall. So right against the window, which is an extreme fire hazard. So we've got someone coming in to remove it. And we have another Mugo pine that I'm very sad that we're going to have to remove a huge part. It's two that have grown together. Anyway, there's, these types of hedges are possible, but you don't want them up against your house. So yes, there are alternatives to cedars, but don't put them up against your house. That's all I have to say on that.
I think we'll cut out questions now, and I'm going to pass things over to Sue to wrap up. But I just want to thank you for a very informative and eye-opening talk on making us a little more aware. And hopefully we'll talk to our neighbors about some of these things too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I do see that there were other questions. I'm sorry for not being able to get to everything.
I echo Margaret's thanks, Corinne. It's such an important topic, and especially with the drought that we've been experiencing this year. We just have a couple of announcements. For next month, the information about our next deep dive will be posted on our website as usual and will be in our newsletter. And if you don't receive our monthly e-newsletter yet, but would like to, you can sign up on our website. As many of you know, this weekend is Meadowlark Festival in the Okanagan. And the theme this year is sustainability. Check out the website to see if there are any of the events that interest you. There are still tickets available for some. One of note is the keynote speaker is Bob McDonald from CBC's Quirks and Quarks. He's speaking in Oliver on Sunday night, and there are still some tickets left for that. Also, First Things First is participating this year, which we've never done before. We have an event in Oliver. We've teamed up with Noble Ridge Winery, and we are offering a 2-hour event Sunday morning that includes family-friendly education about day-to-day climate solutions and a vineyard tour about sustainable growing practices with Benoit Gauthier, who's very enthusiastic and knowledgeable. And just one last item, the regional district of Okanagan's Similkameen has a couple of free workshops coming up. One is about building energy efficient homes. And then there's another one that they are holding on extreme heat risk, and they're looking for public input on that one. So if you're interested in either of those, just check out the regional district website, and we'll probably give those links in the chat, or sorry, in the recording email that you'll be receiving in the next day or so. I can't think of anything else. So unless Lori or Margaret have anything to add.
There is one important question that's come in late, but I think it's important enough to ask Corinne about, and that is, I'm on the West Bench in a rural area of the RDOS, and we can now only water twice a week, but we noticed that water restrictions are different in different areas, and the city of Penticton has made a different decision about water usage. How is it that the different municipalities and districts within the OBWB can choose to have different types of water usage? Isn't it something that the OBWB would say, hey, we've all got to be on the same page?
That's a really great question. No, the fact is that we have several utilities in the valley, and they get their water from various sources. So, for example, Black Mountain Irrigation District uses reservoirs in Kelowna. So that's how they get water to their customers, whereas City of Kelowna draws off Okanagan Lake, whereas Town of Oliver, I believe, is using a lot of groundwater. So it really depends on what the supplies are like. Summerland has reservoirs as well. Peachland uses Upper Valley reservoirs, but also draws from the lake. So throughout the valley, it varies in terms of where, whether it's an upland reservoir or, So no, it really depends on the supply that they have.
That's really great to be aware of that. Thanks very much. That's great.
Yeah, so can I just say one quick thing, is that there is a difference between drought levels that the province sets and water restrictions that the utilities set, because it really does depend on how much water is available for that utility to provide to customers. So, but everyone doing their part to conserve obviously will help everyone down the road.
That's great. Thanks again. Thanks so much. And thank you everyone for participating.